it's been a labor of love, I can tell you that, and it's been a real learning experience. And come the 25th, I'm gonna have a bit of a get together, and
Mhm.
there's definitely gonna be some drinks, and
Some
no
wine, some
matter
wine.
some wine,
Some cigarettes.
no matter what happens with it, like, I can sort of I can really stand proud and say to myself that like I'm not one of those people that just sort of like talks the talk and like goes on about it and then
Mm.
just never ends up doing it. And I think in the modern music industry, I mean to really sort of see something through to the bitter end with how scarce like cash is and the way that labels are sort of ran these days. It's
Mm.
a real triumph, so I'm really proud.
Love will probably kill me before cigarettes and wine. You'll find a way to end me before God could find a time. And take what I have and break it like that. I'd rather go insane than go in vain. 'Cause love will probably kill me before cigarettes and wine. But I don't
Welcome back to my channel. I'm Alex Alicia, your host of The New Rock Show. And the countdown is on because Luke Spiller, who you may recognise as frontman of British rock band The Struts, is releasing his very first debut solo album, Love Will Probably Kill Me Before Cigarettes and Wine. It's out real soon, just a couple of weeks' time. So to talk to us all about it is the wonderful Luke Spiller.
Hello, 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 hello. Thanks for having me.
Hello. You've just been saying though you've been a bit busy recently. You've been trying to like decompress. So before we get into everything, I would love to know what a typical day in the life of Luke Spiller looks like out in LA right now. A couple of weeks away from release day. Yeah, what's been going on? Like photo shoots I've seen, and like you say, the beach I saw on TikTok, and you just mentioned. Yeah, busy, busy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you said it right. I always try and do something productive every day, whether that's sort of like chipping away at like a poem or some lyrics I've been sort of like working on. Um, and that usually will take about 3 or 4 hours, like when I wake up. That's how I'll spend my first sort of 3 or 4 hours. Um, right now. I'm not really doing much physical exercise, which normally sort of happens closer to like a big tour.
Mm.
So like I'm using those mornings to sort of like be creative. There's always something that I need to do, whether it's an interview or approve stuff like admin wise. But in terms of like my own pleasure, like I'll like I'll just sit by myself. I'm a real hermit in
Yeah.
many ways. I'll go. Sometimes I won't leave my house for about 5 or 6 days at a time,
Right.
um, and just sort of like just be with myself. I mean, that might sound quite strange to people, but the truth is, I think my job includes so much of like this essentially, but on a much larger scale, like when you're on tour and when you're traveling, or even, when sort of like going into the studio a lot, it's kind of you really have to turn up
Hmm.
and it's not even putting on a performance. It's more of a case of just being mindful and polite
Yeah.
and mean it,
Mm.
And when I have my free time. I sort of spend a lot of time just on my own,
Yeah.
which is the way I've kind of always been ever since I was a as a little kid. Ask me, mum. It's always been the same.
And you said you were turning into your mum as well on TikTok the other day.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite funny. Like, I've started to really embrace all things TikTok and
Gotta roll with the punches, move with the
well,
times.
I always had a kind of like problem with it, and I think it's like I do think it's a generational thing. I think like when I was growing up and just sort of like the mindset that when it comes to your aesthetics and when it comes to what you put out into the world has always been like quite thought out and I think that's why like a lot of the younger generation are just kind of embrace it. It's a very devil may care attitude like out there. But
Mm.
I've sort of like begun to realize now, like I think when it comes to something like TikTok, it's actually a really cool, healthy exercise to sort of like not worry too much about the world that you're building or some sort of like aesthetic idea that you want to live up to because um that too kind of gets a bit tiring and somewhat a little bit boring sometimes for the audience. So yeah, I mean, I'm really kind of enjoying it at the moment and letting it be kind of like the polar opposite of like my other platforms, which is, quite fun.
Yeah, of course. And like you say as well, if you're spending so much time with yourself, that can be a really nice way to like still feel connected to people without having to actually connect with people, right? Yeah. I know it's not
Yeah.
always healthy, but at the same time, it can be in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still love like a good natter on the phone and if I'm not sort of talking to close friends in the UK or you know, even like my family, of course. You know
Hmm.
what that's like. You get on the phone with your parents sometimes and you'll end up sort of blinking and then you've been on the phone for almost 2 hours, just sort of just chatting. So
Yeah.
I am social. I'm remotely social.
Yeah, we don't want to say you're too much of a hermit. You definitely do actually leave the house once in a blue moon. I
Yeah,
have seen that you have been recently, and yeah, you've been very busy. So I can see why you need that downtime as well. It's important.
yeah, and I kind of like it's a funny job. It's like it's really hard for some people to understand that um, when you write songs or you're sort of even in any sort of creative capacity, like doing something, whether that's like talking about a video, how to roll out a video, just this whole thing that I have, it requires an awful lot of like solitary confinement and literally just sat here at this desk, which is where I spend most of my time,
Yeah.
making notes, thinking about it. And for some people, that would be kind of ludicrous. They'd be like, well, that's not really a job.
Mm.
Um, but whether it's songwriting as well, like sometimes I'll sit for a few hours and just really think about like writing two really lovely verses or stanzas of something
Hmm.
that I really enjoy. And like a whole song can like be born out of like those 2 hours of like sat by the window,
Yeah.
and that's my job.
Yeah.
That's essentially my job and I'm really lucky to do that.
Yeah, of course. And that's just reminded me of a quote I saw from Ernest Hemingway. This is so like random the other day, but I don't know if you might know it. It's quite famous, but it's the one where he says, I'm like paraphrasing, but he said like you as a writer, you sit at your typewriter and you just bleed. That's what it is. There's nothing much else to it because, that's what writing is. That's what creating is. I can imagine that's very much the case with songwriting as well.
Yeah, I sort of go through this process where there'll be like maybe a week sometimes where every time I sit at the piano or I pick up like a guitar, it just sort of makes sense
Mm.
and things just began to like begin to kind of just get sent to me, if that makes any sense. And I write some really great things like very quickly, and I'm on this kind of roll where just it just all falls into place. And then something will happen, whether, life happens or I'll have to do like a one-off show and travel and get out of my routine, or simply the inspiration just kind of just dries up a bit. And then when that happens, I always then go back to just starting with just lyrics and writing like poems, I mean, fancy lyrics, I call those, but things that, just finding the joy in creating something that reads really nicely, and that
Yeah.
I like that challenge. And then before I know it, I suddenly end up picking guitar again, and it kind of like goes in this kind of cycle.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you do have to sit down and make sure that you do it.
Yeah, of course.
That's the only thing, you know.
Yeah, of course. Hearing you say all that, it sounds like a spiritual experience, really magic. And, what a great way, like you say, to spend your time. Since we're on that kind of note, I just want to talk to you a little bit before we really dive into more about the songwriting of the album, more about the album. Um,
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, The Struts has been a band you've been together for like 15 years. And I know music has meant so much to you pretty much all your life. Like, you were a teenager in your very first band performing, and then you've toured with the guys and written like songs, and you've done everything really. And I just wondered, like, for you at this point, with everything you've experienced, like, what does music mean to you, and what is your relationship with music at this point?
That's a very good question. I still love the thrill of finding something that is really beautiful and just really resonates with myself. That feeling when you do stumble across something that you're like, oh yeah, that's great, and you end up sort of singing it in your head, and you
Yeah,
can't wait to, you know, either create a really good demo of it or just go to a studio and cut it.
yeah,
That feeling I kind of live for, and I don't think that will ever go away. It's kind of it's kind of really inspiring. And in terms of my journey, like where I'm at now, like I think I think I've kind of fallen into the trap of a lot of musicians and a lot of writers, especially in bands, when you have like a couple of songs that really kind of explode and get recognized on a very large scale.
mhm.
And sometimes you end up kind of ripping yourself off,
Yeah, of course.
trying to like recreate that.
Yeah,
And I'm very much in like a new era of like my life, and especially like my songwriting, and dare say like even my aesthetic. I think on the whole, I love rock music. Rock music is always going to be within my DNA, and I'm sure we'll touch on it with the solo record. But in many ways, um, I'm inspired to sort of explore different ways of using my voice, different ways of writing, and really kind of not to fall into the trap of repeating myself.
yeah,
Um, and and yeah, I think the simple truth is like compared, the person that I was 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, in terms of what really inspires me and what really resonates with me,
hmm,
it's completely different. It's completely different.
yeah,
And I've also lived a lot of life.
hmm,
And I feel like for the first time, I've been able to document uh, very clearly and as rich as I possibly could, some firsthand, like genuine experiences that I could sort of authentically express.
yeah. And I think, like, as well, like, we really get that from the new album. And like I said, I can't wait to talk to you a little bit more about it. But like, given all the things that you say, you've lived a life already, and I know you're still in like late 30s, aren't you? Don't want to like say the
Hmm.
age, but. So
36.
Yeah, see, there we go. Still young, plenty to still do, but also, you've been doing this for a long time now, which is great. And, like, do you remember though that first moment? Because it's such a hard industry to be in for many different reasons, sometimes the music industry, well, any creative industry, I guess. And do you remember though, like, the first time that you really felt accepted and seen within this industry? Like, do you feel like that's happened to you on a level yet that you're like really happy with? Like, yeah, when did you first feel embraced?
Embraced. I
Mm.
mean, it's a funny old thing, isn't it? Like, I don't know whether this is kind of like my personal preference, and it's something that I struggle with on a day-to-day basis. But like, where I'm at in my career, like, and I'm very proud of the things that I've achieved, but I am I have these waves of being hugely dissatisfied with um, what I've achieved versus like what I dreamed and worked towards to achieve.
Right.
And it's kind of like an ongoing battle. And sometimes it just absolutely cripples me at times. But like, I think the good thing of that is it also keeps me hungry and it keeps me motivated. I mean, there's also an argument to be had, like if I was sort of, universally recognized or had like maybe achieved like half of the things that I've wanted to do in terms of, let's call it like the idea of success, would I sort of remain motivated and
Mm.
would I still be alive? All these
Mm.
kind of things. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, these are the
Um,
questions that I'm sure you ask yourself.
but I think, in terms of like feeling embraced, the the biggest moments have been when I've done shows.
Mm.
I mean, that's the real incredible sign. It's like, the superficial stuff and the financial stuff, um, all of those kind of like accolades that come with, that sort of like next level that like, people find themselves in.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's one thing, but then getting out on tour, it's just incredible where you're sort of playing in front of like these audiences every night where it has connected and it sort of like has really resonated with people. That's when I feel truly, quote, embraced.
Hmm. Yeah, when you can see that connection in front of you and you can see what your art has done for people as well. If you're, like you say, if you're on like on tour and you see crowds of people singing songs back to you, I've been there, I've been at your shows, I've seen that happen, I've seen that audience and you interact. And yeah, it's like, it's really magical. So I can imagine that is a really special moment. Would you say though, because I'm picking up on from you that you might be one of your own like biggest critics? Like, are you a bit of a self-critic, would you say? Is that the way that you are? Like, how are you as an artist?
Yeah, I would say so. Um, I think I just sort of grew up with people that were very kind of like honest with me,
Yeah.
which has proven to be like a really good tool. I definitely think I am like a bit of a harsh critic, and it's sort of like it's one of those things, isn't it, that sometimes as an artist, your biggest enemy can be your ambition, and it's it's not always a healthy thing to sort of like have those kind of goals. And it's also sort of like a process of learning of when those things aren't achieved. It's it's a growing experience. It's a humbling experience.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I am hard on myself. Um, but I'm learning to be easier with myself at the same time. In the last couple of years, and
Yeah.
just sort of appreciate the smaller things, and the small victories.
Yeah, as you should. And I just want to say lots of love. You should be very proud of yourself and everything that you've done so far and everything that's still to come because your brand new album, let's talk about it. It's your first time doing a solo debut album. This is so exciting. For anybody that doesn't know, Luke's album is called Love Will Probably Kill Me Before Cigarettes and Wine. It's out on the 25th of this month, so in a couple of weeks. 10 amazing tracks. I can't wait to hear it in full. I already know it's amazing. I'm saying amazing based on the first three that I have heard. But I just want to ask you, like, this is a really big deal. This is super special. Why did now feel like the right time for you to be able to, embrace fully yourself and, like you say, like things that you have wanted to talk about, write about that maybe wasn't like right for your band, but for yourself at
Mm.
this point in your life? Why now? Like, what was the catalyst?
Well, honestly, it's something that I've kind of quietly wanted to do for quite some time, at least 6 or plus years. And I'm also a great believer that things kind of happen for a reason, et cetera, et cetera. But I think going back to the start of this interview, I sort of mentioned that in many ways I'd sort of like grown and I wouldn't use the word matured, but like sort of like took on the new skill of being a little bit more introspective and insightful in terms of like myself. And I think eh, in pretty much in layman's terms, everything that I'd done before, I kind of like grown out of.
Mm.
And I found myself, I think it was during lockdown, and we'd done like the third album, and I was in a cottage in the United Kingdom in Devon, and I found myself being sucked into sort of like this deep, um, sort of like place of just sort of like not panic, but just real, I guess like despair in a lot of ways, where I was sort of looking back on the small legacy that I'd done, and I was still like, I just don't understand why this hasn't grown. And of course, like COVID sort of really hit the trajectory of like the group quite hard.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I just sort of said to myself, well, what is it that maybe I could be doing better that I haven't done before? And I sort of very quickly came to the conclusion that in terms of like the things that I was writing about, and in terms of like my approach to the songs, I suddenly thought like, you know what, like I've had moments of being really honest, and I've had moments of like being really sincere, and writing in this way that I've done for my solo record, in many ways has always been like the natural way that I sort of will personally sit down at a piano, for instance, and write a song. And I sort of had I for quite a long time I'd sort of suppressed that side of myself to meet the expectations of like the group and my audience and everything, because when you're known for something and people love and adore you for those reasons, that can sort of like also find its way into your writing, where I could be sat writing a really beautiful piece of music, but then at the same time, you sort of start to think like, gosh, what's my audience going to think? How's this going to fit into this thing that I've created? How's this going to correlate with this character, which had soon become like a caricature
Mm.
of myself at the time? And I just said to myself, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start working on a collection of songs that are all about my experiences with love and relationships. And that's it. And because that's been such a huge part of my life, And I wasn't going to deviate away from it. I wasn't going to sort of say, oh, okay, well, I'll do a party song now, and now I'll do a song about, um, you know, going out and getting drunk, or, just being this person, or give any thought to this sort of like person that people sort of thought I was,
Hmm.
and would remain so forever. And yeah, it sort of began this process of like, essentially, I almost created unconsciously like a concept record in many ways of
Yeah.
like of the time of when I first really moved to LA, and then falling in love, falling out of love, dealing with that, the highs, the lows. And it was just sort of like something that I kept coming back to and kept finding so much inspiration for.
Hmm.
And then before I knew it, I had like 15, 16 sort of like songs and ideas, and then just started like chipping away at it really.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a quest. It was a quest to sort of express myself more honestly than I had done before, and in many ways, like showcase who I am really, like 100% authentically, as sort of like as a person, and a writer as well.
Yeah. But when you're saying that, like, would you say this entire process that you've been through with this solo journey, has it taught you anything new about yourself, that maybe you didn't realize until now?
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's almost been somewhat of a therapy record in many ways, and I think uh, I think it's really enforced that like my ideas and my vision should never be sort of like compromised or watered down.
Hmm.
And that's going to be a hard thing to kind of like come back from. But it's I've learned an awful lot about myself, and I've also learned that like, okay, if I sit down and I write this certain type of music, and yeah, it's a little bit musical theater, it's a little bit pretentious, it's a little bit quote, it's a little bit larger than life at times, and it's very dramatic, and
Yes.
it's very emotive. It's also taught me that there is an audience for that, and it can be as appreciated, and in maybe if not a little more in different ways than like sort of like the previous things that I've been known to do in the past.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, like songwriting with a band, there are many factors that you have to take into consideration. For one, yeah, you have to share that role with people, with other members of the band. It has to be a collective. Whereas this time, yeah, I guess you've had that creative freedom to really, like you say, explore and do you how you want to do you. You touched a little bit on the themes of the album. I know you've mentioned like your surroundings of when you first got to LA, and
Mm.
how much those surroundings have impacted you, love and heartbreak. Particularly love, though. It's such a, personal tale to tell as a songwriter. And already with your lyrics, they are so special in this song. You lay so much out for everybody. I wondered for you, like, how cathartic it actually was writing this album, and whether it's a scary process to then put that out to the world, because something like love, you've got to show a lot of vulnerability there, and it is quite intrusive. So, how does it feel, when you're writing about those subject matters and then knowing that once it's out, it's public, and yeah, that's a part of you that you're sharing with the world?
Yeah, you're right. I think that was, I found it incredibly liberating, really. And I think that was one of the things that I realized was that, for so many years, I don't think the audience had ever sort of seen me as kind of like as vulnerable.
Mm.
And it's actually like a little bit scary sometimes because when you're sort of like that honest with yourself, chances are you're not going to paint yourself in the best sort of way.
Mm.
I mean, there's a song on the record called "I'm with her but in love with you," and I'm super proud of it. It's an amazing lyric on it, but it also tells the story of like uh still sort of being slightly, still being essentially heartbroken and then deciding to sort of get out there and get back on the saddle, so to speak, and date again. And having that profound, unshakable feeling of like, gosh, like I'm with her, but I wish I was with you.
Yeah.
And that's not like an easy thing for a lot of people to listen to. And in some ways, it's quite funny, that song in particular, whether I've done it live or whatnot, some people can find it quite triggering, which I guess is like a bad thing because at least it means something. It's even
Mm.
if it's a bad emotion that people are feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's like no one wants to be put in that position. No one wants to be on the other side of that.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't particularly make myself look like an incredible person as well, sort of like, doing that. But again, it's like it's completely honest and vulnerable. And I think those are the things that really resonate with people. And, even the ending is always the same. It's about a situation that, you have these sort of two people that make up, break up, and are kind of in this sort of like, I know the word toxic kind of gets thrown around way too much these days, but I would also call it like a situationship where neither party is taking any accountability
Mm.
in terms of like what they're doing to each other in the long run.
Yeah.
And, again, like I think if I was to have thought that deeply, I probably would have been like, oh, I don't think people really need to sort of like see this dirty laundry, so to speak, and know that I've kind of like, been a part of something like that. But again, it's honest, it's real, and for those reasons, it's like I think that's why it connects, and I think that's why I've been getting so many messages, and the responses have just been incredible as of yet in terms of like,
Yeah.
I went through the same thing,
Mm.
blah blah blah. Now I've got a song to go
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what songs are there for. And, like, hats off to you for being, so vulnerable and so honest. And, it's just part of the human emotion. It's human condition, isn't it? We all go through things like that, different experiences. And, like you say, it's relatable. But that's why we love music so much because we can all find like comfort from it. And I
Mm.
know that many people will find comfort from this album. If they haven't yet listened to the three singles out there, they should definitely go and do that. I've had them, Luke, they've been on repeat. I swear to you, I've been playing them on the show. I love them. You really should be so proud of them. I love this new
Thank you.
era of you. It's so special to see, and I can't wait to hear the full final finished piece in a couple of weeks' time, 25th. It's so exciting.
I know I'm quite. It's quite funny. You were saying last time we spoke would have been June last year
Yes. Yeah.
at Download, and I think I may have had the whole record like recorded by then, or at least like I
I
can't
think
remember, but
I think you did mention it to a friend of mine who interviewed you because I saw the interview that you did with Rock Sound actually. I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
you mentioned it then in that interview, I think. So
Mm.
yeah, you must have. Yeah, long time in the making.
Yeah, it's been honestly since I've been chipping away at it pretty much from in many ways since 2019 up until probably June last year. So
Wow.
it's been a labor of love, I can tell you that, and it's been a real learning experience. And come the 25th, I'm gonna have a bit of a get together, and
Mhm.
there's definitely gonna be some drinks, and
Some
no
wine, some
matter
wine,
some wine,
some
no
cigarettes.
matter no matter what happens with it, like, I can really stand proud and say to myself that like I'm not one of those people that just sort of like talks the talk and like goes on about it and then
Mm.
just never ends up doing it. And I think in the modern music industry, I mean, to really sort of see something through to the bitter end with, how scarce like cash is and, the way that labels are sort of ran these days, it's
Mm.
a real triumph. So I'm really proud.
Yeah, you should be. And that's nice because that's like a proud moment. I was going to ask you about like what moment of making this album were you most proud of? Which you've already kind of answered. But what about challenges though? Did you find this album challenging to make in any way? Or was there any point in that 4 years in the making where you were like, okay, whoa, this is like wasn't expecting this?
Yeah, I mean, again, in talking about learning experiences, it's just like you sort of it's the beauty of being naive, and
Mm.
I think that's sort of like what young bands have, etc., when it comes to like their first couple of records. And for me, I sort of had that with this in many ways, where I was like, okay, I want to do this, and it's got to be all these strings, and I was like, it's got to be real. I mean, just getting the string section and
Hmm.
getting the score right and all of this, these are things that I'd never contemplated about. I was working with an arranger for a few years, for well, actually like 3 or 4 years while I was sort of like writing the material.
Wow, that's
And
so
I
fascinating.
I just thought it'd be a case of just being like, okay, like, we'll just get in the studio and do it. But no, like I had to have another conductor come in. We had to sort of go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. We actually had to record 12 songs, um, all of the string parts, 20 piece string section in one day because of budget constrictions. And we ended up doing it. It was incredible. And it was just like I've posted a couple of moments from that day.
I saw
And
that on your Instagram.
yeah, there's so
Yeah.
much more to come. And I think I look back now and the sheer scope of it, I was just like, bloody hell. But yeah, it's even the videos, like having to, I would sort of pick a day with my director and creative director while I was like on tour, and then it would be my job to then like, try and gather the money. I was selling like my old stage outfits,
Okay,
um,
wow.
just doing anything to raise funds for the
Mm,
video shoot.
mm.
And I sort of shot videos for pretty much like 2 years on and off. Anytime I had a bit of money come in, I
Mm.
put it aside, and we ended up shooting ten videos for all 10 songs of the album. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's some really cool stuff coming. But yeah, it was a challenge, but fucking did it. Did it,
Yes.
mate.
You did it. It's so exciting. And yeah, so like self-funding, you've got to believe in what you're doing as well, which obviously you do. You know, it means so much to you. It's a very personal album. I love the orchestra string section vibes. It's so classic. It's beautiful. It's so amazing. And obviously with that, being the case, it's brought you really wholesome connections with talented people, hasn't it? You got to like work like you always do with amazing people, but like yeah, working with an orchestra, working with like you say conductors, with different people on this album, it must have been really special and a really freeing experience. But also can't not mention that I did see Noel Fielding appeared in one of your videos as well, and
Yeah.
I feel like that was quite a low key thing, low key in love. Just gonna get that in there. Yeah, that was really lucky. You kept that on the down low, and then I saw it, and I was like, I know that person. Hang on a sec, and it's so funny because he could be your twin when you had the dark hair, Luke era.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I met him a while back at a club in London, and then in short, the my director Joseph Lynn
Mhm.
has worked with Noel, and also kind of like the Boosh as well to some capacity, like way back when, and continues to like do stuff with Noel, and so me and Joe were working really closely with each other and
Mm.
still do. And when it came to the single releases, the first 3 to 4 songs before the album was to come out,
Mm.
the ending is always the same was one of them, and that was one of the songs that we didn't have a video for.
Okay.
And we were like, fuck, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And I'd sort of like ran out of money at that point, and I was really struggling to sort of like keep my head above water and even like pay my rent. And I, we sort of like went round all these ideas, and then it was Joe who was like, do you know what? Like, why don't we do sort of like a lyric video? But it's like it's not just your normal kind of lyric video. There is sort of like a set,
Mm.
and it's sort of like, it costs way less than like our usual videos.
Yeah.
And I could see if like Noel would be interested. And I was like, that would be amazing. Like, yeah, let's do it. So Noel absolutely kind of loved the concept of him just sort of sitting there and all
Mm.
this stuff happening around him. And
Yeah.
and then when I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is perfect. This is going to make so many people be like, what? Like and already start asking questions. But
Yeah.
it's very much his sense of humor. It's kind of that slightly surreal Monty
Mm.
Python um kind of style of
Yeah.
comedy. And he's a huge hero of mine. So it was just great to have him in it and be a
Mm.
part of the project.
Yeah. It's a very you situation, isn't it? To be able to like bring out some kind of collab somewhere. It's just
Yeah.
it's typical you fashion, which we love. But obviously as well, I've heard you in other chats about this album. Like you mentioned Bond a little bit, and I can see why. I can hear why as well. Like we mentioned the dramatics of the album so far and that black and white classic feel to it, and all the vibes. But without talking about like Bond as like the music, I can't not ask a performer such as yourself. I'm going to put you on the spot here. But if you were given the opportunity to do the iconic line, Luke, the name's Bond, James Bond, how would you deliver it? Because with you, I feel there might be like a darling thrown in there or something like Bond darling.
Yeah, he'd be a way more campy Bond, wouldn't he? Um, I don't even know if I could take that on. Look, I tell you what, I'd be happy, more than happy to take on the role of creating the soundtrack, which is kind of like how the whole album kind of began
Yeah.
in many ways, where Devil and Me and Angel Like You, the closing and opening song of the record, those were my attempts back in 2019 to write a James Bond song to submit to the studios. And and yeah, I was very ambitious. I was like, I could do this, blah 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 blah. And an Angel Like You, which is a song that's coming out the day of the album, I sort of like it was really Bond. And at the time I called up my friend Taylor Hawkins and I was like, would you want to drum on this? And he was like, yeah, man. So I went up to his house
No.
and we cut the drums on it and everything. And then yeah, we sort of like had those songs. Of course, it never made the Bond, never made the films. And of
Yet.
course,
Yet. Dot dot
of
dot.
course, Billy and Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas obviously got that. But that being said, again, everything happening for a reason,
Yeah.
it gave me two songs that I sort of lived with for a bit, and I thought there's got to be more to this. And like I was like, I wrote these pretty much by myself, and they're really good. And from then on, I just sort of like carried on going down that rabbit hole, which
Mm.
led to an entire album.
Mm.
So, it all comes back to Bond, which is why throughout the album there's quite a few little Bond moments or Bond-esque moments, because that's what I was really inspired by. And
Mm.
in many ways, like, I was listening to a lot of female singer-songwriters, because I feel like they're the only people in the solo performer world that actually say stuff that means something.
Yeah.
You know, like Lana and Adele, for instance.
Mhm.
These are artists that actually speak from the heart, and I was sort of like looking at the scope of male artists, and I was like, there's not actually a lot of guys out there that are sort of like submitting and singing lyrics that really I don't know, I just sort of felt like everyone was sort of quite a little bit diluted, and I thought like, men could be a bit more richer with their lyrical content.
Mm.
And that sort of like really inspired me, but Lana's kind of honeymoon era, for
Yeah.
instance, like I love that record. And I sort of said to myself, like, if Luke Spiller was to be like a solo artist, to kind of to work towards like the vision of like what would the male version of like Lana look and sound like. That was also like a huge inspiration.
I like that, because it's like you say, it's like bridging a gap that you've noticed in the industry as a consumer, not just as an artist, you say you
Yeah.
listen to music as well. Just on that note though, like what else have you noticed about the industry, or what would you love to see maybe brought into the industry or changed for artists like yourselves and also for younger artists, emerging artists coming through? Is there anything that you've kind of pinpointed as right that might help people like me if this happened?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not to get too deep into it, but I think, the streaming platforms could definitely switch up their model, and even the consumers as well. And I hear a lot of people sort of, complaining about Spotify and Apple Music in particular in terms of them not paying enough for the artists. But I was reading something very interesting with the concept of like 1 cent, one stream concept.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, like, yeah, that's fair. And, the backside of that would be, or sort of the other side of the coin rather, would be that the consumer would have to pay more for music. Because if you think about it, this is so bizarre. Like for the price of like um like a meal going out somewhere or a
Mm.
round of drinks, you can have like access to most of the music that's ever been created since popular pop culture began,
Yeah, it's
right?
crazy, isn't it? At your
For, for,
fingertips on your phone.
for, for a whole entire month. And that is actually
Yeah.
like mind blowing. And I remember like back in the day, it's like, you really had to sort of like put your money where your mouth was in terms of like building your own sort of collection
Mm.
and like and appreciating your mu and I think that led to sort of like music being appreciated on a whole different level. So I think like I'd love to see the industry sort of shake things up a bit and go to this sort of like 1 stream, 1 cent model and charge the consumer more because, it's the touring industry at the moment is harder than ever. And when you're when you're sort of like starting out, it's really bad. And then it actually isn't that much better once you get to sort of like the mid-level. It's creating this sort of like wealth divide between like the top 5% of people versus like everybody else in an industry where the costs of touring are going up like bit by bit with each year, and the demand for more music because of how everyone's consuming it is now in overdrive.
Mm.
There has to be something that changes because, it's just so difficult now to sort of sustain a genuine career and even sort of like a basic lifestyle for a huge majority of people in this industry. So I think there needs to be some sort of gathering of like minds and some sort of process because it's been done before. You
Mm.
know, look, if Taylor Swift cannot change Spotify's mind,
Hmm.
the biggest artist of like the 21st century,
Yeah.
it's not going to work, you know,
Yeah.
and the simple fact is that people cannot pull their music from these streaming platforms because that's how everybody is just like consuming the music. So
Yeah.
it might not be a popular opinion, but I think we need to start charging the consumer more for the music, and if they can't afford it, then tough shit, you know. It's just like everything else in life, you know, if you it's like, oh, you know, I want a Rolls Royce, you know, can I pay this much for it? No. Okay, well,
You can't have
I
one there.
guess you can't have one then. I think it's got to be like that, or like the same way as movies work. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So yeah, that I'd like to see that change. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that would, like you say, that would help just on a very like, like you say, like basic level, wouldn't it? There's so many like there's so many things like wrong at the moment with music for artists, for consumers and stuff. But yeah, I just wonder what it was like from your perspective when you are in it, and you see these things happening around you and what you as an artist might get frustrated by. So yeah, like that's really like, an important note to make. And yeah, I'm curious what other people might think of that if they watch this back. If they want to let us know, comment.
Who knows?
And
Who
then maybe you might
knows?
get a load of bullies, but who knows?
Look, I tell you what, like I honestly think like in 20 years' time, people will look back at this era of the music industry and they'll
Yeah.
just be like, how were we letting everyone get away with this? They would be like this. I think there's going to be something that happens because it just happens in music, whether it's like, you know, back in the 60s, like how much labels used to take, or
Mm,
when it goes back to the 70s and before Peter Grant and Led Zeppelin sort of you know, really revolutionized like the way that tours were sort of financed and how much money the bands were getting versus like the promoters, the venues, everything. We're in a transitional phase at the moment where the the consumption of music has drastically gone so the other way
yeah.
that I think there are people that are still like clinging on to the importance of like physical record sales and using the excuse of like, oh, well, vinyl's still going up, you know, but that's never going to disappear. But for the vast majority, it's like everything is going to go to streaming. Everything will. It's like,
I really hope
I,
not.
I think that, no, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. The romanticism of owning your own physical thing will never die. You know, that's just kind of like in our nature as humans to sort of have something and hold it.
Yeah.
But in terms of sheer convenience and promotional value, etc., it's like, you know, everything's going to go streaming. It's the same with television. You know, it's like everything's going that way slowly, 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 slowly. And yeah, there's gonna have to be some sort of like real changes at some point. And like I said, I think everybody's gonna be absolutely baffled and they're gonna, you know, these sort of younger kids that are coming up in bands, they're gonna be like, wow, I'm so glad I wasn't existing in this era of the music industry because that would have sucked. That would have
Yeah.
absolutely sucked, you know?
It's a mad one. It really is. But on more positive notes, Love Will
Yeah,
Probably Kill Me before Cigarettes and Wine. Compliments on the album title as well. Love it. Um,
thank you.
I just want to know for you, how do you know when an album is done? It's finished. You gotta stop working on it now. You're happy with it and you're putting it out. It's done.
It's a very good question. I think well, with this record, like I was constantly making notes in terms of like what the overall listening experience was going to be.
Mhm.
And I think the advantage that I had with this record versus other things that I'd done in the past was that there wasn't sort of there wasn't like a month of allotted time or so, whatever, to sort of
Yeah.
like sit and record it. I sort of like chipped away at it for a few years. So I would sort of sit and listen to the two or three songs that I had, and I would say to myself like, oh, okay, well, what do I need next? Like, what's the next sort of shade of color that I could introduce into this collection? And it sort of went like that, really. And then once I kind of got to, the 9, 10 track mark, there was two other songs that were floating around, and I just sort of said to myself, like, okay, like it's done now. Like it's done. I feel like it's done. I can't really, I can't really sit anymore
Mm.
and contribute to any of this when I'm writing. And I I sort of knew that everything had been closed on it. Um, I just think you just know in your heart of hearts, which is good because I think and I've been in these situations before, when you're sort of like writing and writing and writing right up until the very last minute, it's usually because you don't feel like you've got stuff there already and you're sort of like in panic mode.
Mm.
Um, but with this album, I had like I had the title track, I had like the two kind of Bondy things, and once two or three other things came out of the woodwork, I was like, yeah, I'm on a home run now. Like all I need is this,
Yeah.
and all I need is that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, as soon as I get these, like done, you know.
Exciting. I can imagine like when you really do like walk away from it and you think, right, that's it. Ah, it's done. Terrifying, but exciting
Yeah,
and everything, all the emotions. And I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful time for you on the 25th when it comes out. And like you say, you're having a bit of a party, a bit of a gathering, as you should, to celebrate. We've got to wrap up a little bit because I feel really bad. Like you've been talking to me for almost an hour now.
oh
But
really?
yeah,
Wow.
on a couple of final notes, I can't
Mm.
not have you here and not ask about the Struts, of course. I mean, I know this whole
Hmm.
interview is about your wonderful solo creation, and it's so exciting. I know that people have asked you, even online, like, oh, I hope this is not the end of the band. We know it's not. You said it's not. I just wondered if you've got anything brewing with the Struts still. Any tea for us?
Any tea?
Any tea?
Well, I can tell you that I've sort of given myself the goal of creating either I'm hoping to have written and recorded like an entire new Struts album before the autumn, and on top of that, have a follow-up solo like EP. I don't know. I mean, I've got enough material for another album,
Uh,
but I think in terms of like just time and budget, like it might be more realistic that I'll have sort of like, maybe like a three to four song sort of like follow-up EP that I
mhm.
can sort of like have ready, at least in its demo phase. But yeah, like, it's all systems go. And as you know, it's like it's the 10-year anniversary of the debut album, and I'm sure we're going to be celebrating that come the autumn. It's a bit of
Ah,
tea.
that really is the tea.
Yeah, that's the
That's the
tea. But
tea.
yeah, but no, but yeah, like, just to sort of like answer fans' queries, it's like, I'm not going anywhere, and I think, but what I think everyone needs to be aware of is like, I think after 15 years, it's like I'm beginning this record of mine and everything else is just sort of like it's just it's the gateway into a new era of my life where I'm not going to be dedicating like 100% of myself and my time like into a band that's been going for like 15 years. Do you know what I mean? It's like in order to stay sane and happy, I need to be able to do other things, because
Yeah,
I think it's just healthy, and you learn to appreciate everything
sure.
much more. And creatively as well, it's good to know that in those moments where I'm like, oh, like, I've written this really lovely song and it's completely from the heart. I don't have to sort of like, either convince the jury, so to speak, or worry about expectations. I can just sort of quietly go over to this area
Mm.
and lay it down and do it the way I feel like it should be done and let it live out there, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's so important. And I know, like other people have said before, like sometimes you do as a band, like you all have to kind of branch out and live different lives separately for a second to then reunite and come back with more tales to tell, to share with each other that you can then
Yeah,
write about. And that's so important. But also, you mentioned earlier, like this is your job, this is your work. And sometimes people change jobs because they're bored, fed up, they need a challenge, they
yeah,
need a new thing. And I think sometimes people forget with musicians that it's still a little bit that way for you. We all know that you love it. It's a special kind of job to have, and it's fun and all that. But yeah, it's still a job for you at the end of the day as well. And sometimes you do need that challenge and to branch out. But it's really cool that you have. So excited! Cannot wait to hear it all. 25th of April, everyone can get their hands on it, and yeah. Love will probably kill me before cigarettes and wine. It's coming really soon. Whoop, whoop, whoop. We're so excited.
yeah. Thank
On a
you.
final note, Luke, I just wondered, what would you say to young you, and what might you say to future you, knowing right now what you know? Have you got a message for yourself, maybe?
Hmm. My younger self.
Uh-huh. Little Luke.
I think I would say to my younger self, like, you know, it's gonna happen. You're you're gonna experience some great things and you're gonna achieve a lot. Enjoy the journey and maybe wind your neck in a bit.
Fair enough.
Yeah, wind your neck in a bit. Don't be don't be scared. Don't be afraid. And don't sort of like make decisions based on desperateness and fear.
Mm,
Follow your heart, stand up for yourself, do what you want to do.
mm.
Um, and with my future self, not me. Um, my future self would be um, I don't know. I don't know. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Was it worth it?
That could be the name of your
Sh-
future autobiography as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Luke, thank you so, so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you once again. Can't believe we first met in 2021 and here we are again, 2025. So it's been a real pleasure and I hope to see you and do this again another time real soon and good luck with the release.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much. It's been a real blast. Appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it. Thank you very much, Sam.
Pleasure as always. Have a great day and see you
And you,
soon.
love. Switching a bit.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Love will probably kill me before cigarettes and wine, but I don't mind.